Life hasn't always been easy for me. My father was in the Air Force, and I was born at Fort Bragg Army Base. My mom raised the six of us, and we grew up picking cucumbers and corn on the family farm. I don't come from wealth. I come from hard work. Farming was difficult, and so was growing up black in the South. I know what it means to struggle, to fight the kind of fights that so many families across North Carolina are fighting today, against eviction, against poverty, against crippling medical bills, against floods and storms that are claiming lives and livelihoods across the state. But who's really on the other side of that fight? How many of these politicians have ever wanted for anything in their lives? I'm Erica Smith. I'm an engineer, educator, minister, and three-term state senator. I understand the dignity of work, the value of faith, and the importance of serving our communities. We've seen the cost of a morally bankrupt system that fails to represent us. We've seen what happens when North Carolina Democrats don't nominate candidates who reflect the experiences or the diversity of our state. We need something different because our survival depends on it. That's why I'm running for the United States Senate, because I believe it's past time for government to work for all of us instead of just the wealthy and the well-connected. I'm not taking a dime from corporations, their PACs, or fossil fuel companies, because those guys already have enough servants in D.C. We have a government that grants billionaires tax cuts, yet fails to ensure workers a living wage. But it doesn't have to be like this. We can strengthen unions and raise wages to create a 21st century middle class. We can create a healthcare system that at long last prioritizes people over profits and puts an end to the days when a family goes bankrupt because someone got sick. We can and we must choose workers over big oil and combat the climate crisis by creating millions of new jobs in the energy system of the future. We can build a different North Carolina. One that loves us back the same way we love it. One where it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, or brown. Whether you were born in the rural West, the rural East, or any of the towns and cities in between. One where everyone can live with dignity and retire with it too. We are building a North Carolina where our God-given potential will be enhanced by a system meant to lift us up and not squandered by one meant to hold us down. A North Carolina that works for all of us. Join us, and together we can transform this state and change the world.
If you're listening to us on the podcast, thanks so much. We're really trying to build the podcast as far as that goes. Definitely subscribe, like, and share this video. This is with a woman that's very impressive. The Democratic establishment is scared of her. They were scared of her in 2020. They're scared of her again in 2022. And the GOP establishment is definitely scared of her. They showed that in 2020, and I'm sure they're going to show it in they're going to show it in 2022 too. But this woman we're going to have on right now is running for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. Her name is Senator Erica D. Smith. She's got so many positions she's done throughout her life. I'm going to let her explain herself to you because she has the most amazing resume that anybody that I've interviewed on this radio show. So, Erica, thanks so much. I really appreciate you coming on. And thanks for everything you've done to really pump up the progressive movement and really help people in North Carolina in general.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited about the opportunity that this means not only for North Carolina, but for Florida and for all other states in this union. And this is about sending a strong progressive Democrat as the next U.S. Senator. And that is going to be something that impacts us on the entire nation. And so, as you said, I wear a lot of hats. I am an engineer by training. I'm an educator by trade. I'm an ecumenical leader by call, and I'm an equity builder by mission. And so I spent 13 years in engineering. I was the first Boeing scholar at my alma mater, North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. Most of you know that is the #1 public HBCU in the nation. And I always have to throw out my Aggie pride. And so after graduating with my Bachelor's of Science in Engineering, I became an engineer, worked for Boeing and for the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I stayed in engineering for 13 years. While I was, ending my engineering career, I attended theology school at Howard University, and I majored and concentrated in Christian and political ethics. And so that has been my trajectory into social justice and making sure that we, do the work of policy making to change the status quo. So after 13 years as an engineer, went on a mission trip to Uganda, and I was like, wow, we can send technology to Jupiter and back, but we can't to developing countries beyond our borders or rural parts of the state and nation within our borders. And so that's when I left engineering. I became an educator. I started doing community building, grassroots building, served on my local school board, and then I went to the state Senate in 2014. And so from there, I ran for U.S. Senate in 2020. And as you said, there were barriers and obstacles on both sides. I was outspent. Well, the Democratic establishment spent $15 million in a primary to get past me. The Republicans spent $5 million. So $20 million to my one. I was outspent 20-1, but we certainly had a tremendous showing and excited about this run in 22.
We are in a time of coronavirus. I just stated that the numbers are going back up. How are you going to run a safe campaign in a time of coronavirus?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we had a face-to-face campaign kickoff, and it was really successful. Most of us double masked, and we provided the social distancing that's required, and we followed all of the recommendations of the executive order. In terms of what I will do in Washington, D.C., as well as what I'm doing in North Carolina, is to make sure we prioritize vaccinations, and we know that this is ongoing. This is not you just get your 2 shots or your 1 shot, whichever one you're taking, and then that's it. No, this is ongoing, just like we get the flu vaccination. So we need to make sure that our CDC, our epidemiologists, and working with our World Health Organization, that we're making the necessary connections and building the relationships across the nation so this can be an ongoing process. How we're staying safe is we have limited a lot of our face-to-face events. We're doing them virtually, and when it is safe to do so, we will be following all the protocols. Most of our events have been outdoor events, and that's what we plan to continue. And there's nothing like firing up our base and meeting people where they are and going out to communities all over the state. And we have had much success with our events being outside, socially distanced, and following all the protocols to make sure people are safe.
We look at the Democratic primary for the North Carolina U.S. Senate race. There's a lot of people running. There's a lot of people that may jump into this race. How are you going to stand out from that pack of people running?
Well, I will stand out the same way I stood out in 2020. I am the only, regardless of who gets in the race. Currently, we have 4 Democrats, myself included, who have announced that they are running and launched their campaigns. We also know that there are 2 more women, I believe, who are contemplating getting into the race. They're still thinking about it. So there is no candidate. Looking at the 4 that are here and the 2 that are planning to file, there is no candidate in this race who has been, who's lived in, organized in, represented, built coalitions in the rural part of our state, and also understand the dynamics of serving in our urban centers. Let's just face it, Democrats have been losing. We lost the state of North Carolina to Donald Trump, not only in 2016, but in 2020. And that is because we've lost rural voters. We've lost indigenous voters. We've lost marginalized communities. There is no other person in this race who has done the work and has the strong policy background, the advocacy, been doing the community work with indigenous communities, with marginalized communities. I was the only Democrat in the 2016 racially gerrymandered districts in North Carolina in the state Senate, and the 2018 politically gerrymandered districts that was elected from a 100% rural district. And you know why? It is because I know what concerns rural voters. I've been listening to rural voters for the last 20 years organizing in North Carolina. So they know me. I know rural North Carolina. Rural North Carolina knows me. So we are distinguished because there's no other candidate who has the bold leadership to offer Medicare for all. And if you can't talk about Medicare for all, Rob, while we are in a worldwide pandemic, and we look at the almost 600 million people who have died, 600,000 people who have died in in United States.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the numbers, I saw some statistics earlier. A third of those, when it was at 560,000, a third of them died because they did not have health insurance. They did not believe that they were going up against obstacles of owing lots of money at local healthcare providers. And so they did not seek the healthcare because they didn't have medical insurance. And so there's no one bold enough to run off of strengthening our unions. I'm the only one in this race who has actually been a member of a union. If it were not for the mail handlers union, my sister and I would not have been able to afford our freshman year of college. It's my dad being a member of a union, myself being a member of the union when I was an engineer and with SPIA out in Seattle, Washington. I know that the unions and workers and building that base is the way we build the middle class, create the 21st century middle class. There's no one else running on the Green New Deal. Understanding that we have the only plan that prioritize addressing the climate crisis with the bold action that we're going to have to take before 2035 and 2030. What we have to do now to make sure that we have a planet and to make sure that we can create millions of good paying jobs, creating the energy system of the future that is so needed.
So we
So
got
we're not worried about who's in this race or who's getting in this race. We know that we have the only platform that speaks to those who are struggling and who have been left on the sidelines for far too long. It's more of us than it is of them.
And you talked about unions. We need to pass the PRO Act. I know that's being pushed right now.
Absolutely.
Especially, go ahead.
Thrive Act. Yes.
Say, yeah, we need to get that passed, especially with the loss of the Amazon union down in Alabama and the dirty tricks that Amazon plays and a lot of these corporations play. Now we're looking at some of the characters before we move on to the issues. A lot of these characters in the Republican Party that are looking at running, there's really a good cast of characters. Pat McCrory, former governor over there, Mark Walker, and Lara Trump. So you may have to run against a Trump and a crazy former governor there, and obviously a former congressman with Walker. What do you think of that?
Well, Walker's only going to make Wall Street happy. They will be happy that he's in there. I'm not worried about Pat McCrory. He's our disgraced governor of HB2, who signed that legislation and signed into legislation the worst voter suppression, voter ID law, which the U.S. Supreme Court ruled was the worst seen since Jim Crow segregation. I took on Pat McCrory and Duke Energy several years ago. I took them on in 2019 in my last session in the North Carolina Senate, and I won each time. We're not afraid to take on Pat McCrory. As for Lara Trump, I believe that the people that I serve in North Carolina, they will see right through Lara Trump. She is not going to be able to offer North Carolinians what they need. It's a shame that she's polling so high. And don't forget, we have our our present lieutenant governor considering a run. But we do know that North Carolina will be a battleground state. There is so much at stake, not only for the state, but for the nation. And the only candidate who can take on McCrory, Lara Trump, and everyone else is the same candidate who was the only candidate to beat Tom Tillis in every poll and by wider margins, 2 digits. And so the same way I took on Tom Tillis and would have defeated him, I would defeat those Republicans when it comes down to the November general election. And I believe I'm the strongest candidate to be able to do that.
and a Senator of the Year multiple times. So congratulations on that.
Multiple times. Every session that I served, I was Senator of the Year by the largest union in our state, and also by the Legal Conservation Voters, and also the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. My record definitely speaks for itself. A good indication of what somebody will do is to look at what they have done. And so I know that I offer what we need in this crisis that we're facing in this nation.
Erica, as we move on, what would be your first bill that you would want to pass in the United States Senate?
The first bill that I would want to introduce is a bill that provides for for UBI. And I am a big practicer and follower of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I know that in his last publication before he was assassinated, he discussed that the solution to poverty is to end it. And the best way to end it is now we have the resources as we're looking to build back better, a uniform basic income, a guaranteed income. I'm so thankful for Andrew Yang when he was running in the Democratic primary for elevating and bringing that conversation. But I also follow the work of Reverend Dr. William Barber and the poor people, understanding how we can lift folks out of poverty, generations out of poverty with just say $1,000 a month. And that proposal that we're shooting for and that we're planning to introduce, there will be the opportunity for those who are wealthy to opt out. But we believe that it should be everybody in, nobody out, just like with Medicare for All.
I do want to talk about firearm safety measures. We just saw before we went on the air, there was a big shooting in Austin that just happened. There's been shootings all over the country, from in Colorado at the supermarket, in Chicago. There was a kid that had his hands up and the police shot him. Yes, him. And also, obviously, what's going on in Minnesota. It's really a travesty what's going on right now with firearm safety. I don't want to go into social justice because that was my next question, but in general, this firearm safety measures need to happen in this country, whether it's the assault ban or something else needs to be done. As a member of the U.S. Senate, when you get elected, Erica, what would you do? What do you want to do as far as guns? Because it's really out of control. It seems like every day there's a mass shooting in grocery stores, in museums, in arenas. It's crazy.
I am fully committed to supporting what was former HR 11112, the all-out ban of assault rifles, ban on bump stocks, banning rapid fire ammunition, or at least setting a threshold for a limit on that. I support some sort of program for buyback to completely get those guns off the street. They don't belong with civilians. These are weapons for war, and they should only be for our soldiers, and no one should have assault rifles who are citizens. I believe that we should close the loopholes that come from not having a 10-day waiting period. And make sure that we have universal background checks, understanding the importance of what the statistics have shown us. When we did have a ban on assault rifles, we had a decrease in mass shootings. Once that ban was lifted, we had more mass shootings than we had days of the year last year. And looking at how we're trying to come back to gain some sense of normalcy after COVID, and then to go back into these mass shootings where we were before COVID is untenable. It is time. Enough is enough. And I am fully in support of assault rifle bans, universal background checks, and closing loopholes.
This has been going on since the days of our founding, but we're seeing Black men and women shot all over the country. It's gotten worse than ever, and it's by the police. We also, and to go back to 2015, we think about Sandra Bland even getting killed while in police custody in prison. So that, along with Breonna Taylor, along with everything else that's going on right now and that's going on in the past, as a U.S. Senator, how do we fix these issues? Because It's out of control. We're all Americans. We all, whether you get arrested by the police or get stopped, you should be treated with respect and dignity. Again, you're innocent until proven guilty. That's what our justice system says. But apparently, for some people, that's okay if you're white, and I'm white, and I'll say it. But, if you're black or Hispanic or Native American or Asian, it doesn't matter. It's however the officer feels. It's really out of control.
First, I don't think that it can wait until I make it to the U.S. Senate because we're looking at March of 22 as the primary, November of 22. I actually did a post the other day, and I feel that we should first pause and have a nationwide moratorium on traffic stops until we can get a sense of what we need to do and the urgency of now to stop the senseless murders of motorists. Dante Wright was stopped. You could see his license plate in the rear window, or some people suggested it was because of some dice he had hanging over his mirror. But certainly a traffic stop for a minor infraction should not lead to you being shot, whether you thought it was your taser or a gun, to be shot at point blank range. And so for Dante Wright and his family, it's too late. But for right now, just like President Biden signed executive orders for this and executive orders for that, and with what he is contemplating continuing to do, we need to stop and do a check. We're just looking at Adam Toledo, 13 years old. And so I really believe the first part of that question is these were minor traffic stops. So maybe we need to do, for now, stop police from doing traffic enforcement. Leave that to another type of state public safety person, and or the highway patrol. Leave the traffic enforcement to them. But for police stations, for right now, maybe we need to put a pause on it until we can set forth some common sense criminal justice policing reforms that will stop the senseless and endless killing of Black and brown men in particular. And so I want to say their names: Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor. So we definitely know we need to ban no-knock warrants. Making sure that we start having that discussion about the immunity that they get. We've got to stop this qualified immunity if you think that you can kill someone who's innocent and unarmed and get away with it every time. So I don't have the perfect solution, but I do know that the urgency is now. We're going to have to approach this from a different standpoint. We need to have an all-out moratorium for now of traffic stops by police officers until we can get this corrected and put some measures in place that will stop this senseless killing. Because at the end of the day, Rob, this is state-sanctioned violence against Black and brown people, Black and brown men, and it has gone on. It's a systemic holdover from slavery 400 years ago, Jim Crow, segregation, and the violence has to end. I was in college with Rodney King, and the videos are making it show all the more prevalent. Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. And, we originally thought 8 minutes, 46 seconds, and I'm sorry, I can go on and on and on, but for his family to have to relive the last moments of his life, enough is enough. And we need to have the immediate urgent action by executive order from President Biden. And then we need to have an emergency release of common sense reforms so we can end this killing of Black and brown people, particularly innocent people, in a traffic stop.
I want to talk about Medicare for all and environmental issues in the minimum wage. We have a president who I think has done some pretty good things. He's been more progressive than I thought he would be. But you're a person that's in favor for a minimum wage of $15 an hour. You're a person that's in favor of Medicare for all. We have a president that said if Medicare for all came to his desk, he would veto it right off the bat. And again, as we talked about before the interview started, the president didn't really fight too hard for the $15 minimum wage. He kind of said, oh, the parliamentarian didn't want to do it, so we couldn't do it. There's talks now, which is somewhat good, I guess, that Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, and Mitt Romney are talking about maybe a $10, $11, or $12 minimum wage. Let's talk about that first. As far as the minimum wage goes, what is your position on? I know you're a $15 girl, but what is your position on the 10, the 11, or the $12? Because that's the incremental change that Joe Biden promised.
Now is not the time for small ideas, and we certainly can't wait on the incremental change. It is the urgency of now, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King would say. If we were to index the wage at inflation, it would be at $22 an hour.
Right. Yeah.
So for me, $15 is the floor, no lower. I have filed a lot of legislation while I was in the North Carolina Senate for a Service Workers Tax Relief Act, understanding tipped wages and how that perpetuates the poverty of the gig economy and service workers. And so I really just think it's so important for us to understand we have not we've had the same federal minimum wage for how many years and have not increased it and have not gone up. We cannot go lower than $15 an hour. So that is it for me. Also understanding what we have to do when we have the political leadership. It is the political will, it's the political leadership, but if it were on the other foot, Mitch McConnell would not have conceded to a parliamentarian. And so we need to make sure that we move those relics and those parliamentary procedures that only serve as obstacles of granting people their due payment, their just civil rights, and what working people in this country deserve. So you already know, Rob, I am for abolishing the filibuster. It is a relic that has been used as a tool of obstruction for civil rights. For too long, the filibuster has been used to suppress and oppress Black and brown people, women, and all of those who deserve our opportunity to aspire to the American dream. I am not in support of anything lower than $15 an hour minimum wage.
Right. We look at the infrastructure bill going into environmental issues, something as a person that's from a rural community, represented a rural community, you have to be happy with the broadband push in the Biden infrastructure bill. However, there is also a push for green jobs in the bill, and there is a push for green energy in the bill. However, it's only $2.3 trillion. If we look to progressive politicians in the Senate, in the House, their bill was for 10 to 11 trillion. You're right.
Over 10 years. And so that's why I'm very much invested and committed to supporting the Thrive Act. I look at what it will do for North Carolina alone, 300,000 new jobs in North Carolina. Also understanding that the relationship between the Green New Deal and Medicare for all and a $15 minimum wage, and why I support that, because the climate crisis is a racial justice crisis. The racial justice crisis is an economic crisis. And because they're inextricably bound, we have to understand the ability of those comprehensive initiatives to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And Dr. Barbara has shared just raising the minimum wage alone will lift 39 million people out of poverty. And that's just with a stroke of the pen and signing it into action, into a policy that's going to work and do the most good. As we're building back better, this is the opportunity to do that. I do commit to looking at green transportation and the green jobs and understanding what this will do. North Carolina is well leveraged. We have, more solar opportunities. We're second in the nation behind Texas with that. Looking at wind farms, the Amazon wind farm that we have off of Pasquotank County. So I've been very committed. I'm a climate crisis advocate. I'm an environmental justice advocate. And Rob, you mentioned Medicare, Medicare for all, and why I support that. So when we get an opportunity, I would like to get down into the layers of that, the reason why I support Medicare
Sure.
for all.
Go ahead.
I gave birth to a medically fragile son. He was born 1 pound, 1/2 ounce, and it is systemic from Black women's maternal mortality rates are so high. They're higher than developing countries. And that is unacceptable with one of the greatest countries, in the world. We can afford to do better about what we're doing in terms of healthcare decisions, and the impacts that it has, particularly on Black and brown people. And so due to pregnancy-induced hypertension, I gave birth in my 5th month. My son was in the neonatal intensive care unit for 6 months before we brought Elias home. When we brought Elias home, my former spouse and I, we were both state employees, which I thought we had good health insurance. Everybody loves their health insurance until they have a problem and they realize just how bad their insurance is. And so my insurance gave me 4 hours of nursing care with a child with a tracheostomy, Rob. He had a tracheostomy. He had just had a feeding tube removed. He had feeding issues. He was grossly underweight. We brought him home, though, and we were really excited to have him home. We got qualified. We finally had to, we were almost bankrupt. We almost lost our house, couldn't make our mortgage payment with the medical expenses and the co-pays that we had. And so eventually we worked really hard to try to apply for Medicaid, children's Medicaid. In order to qualify, we had to get rid of every asset. We had an extra vehicle that we had to get rid of. That extra vehicle, my older son was using for his part-time job, and he was also taking his other 2 siblings to soccer practice, piano, whatever. All of that had to go out of the door, just couldn't afford it. While he qualified for Medicaid Cap C, in North Carolina, he did not qualify for some medical equipment. And so the humidifiers, the nosies that go over your tracheostomy, this is an infant with a tracheostomy. You need the humidifiers to keep liquid, foreign objects from getting in to the inline. Those nosies cost me $368 a month. I had to get a part-time job at the alternative school. So I worked in the regular ed program from 7 in the morning until 3:30. I took a break, and then I started teaching at the alternative school from 4 to 7:30. Now, the great news in that is that my students had 100% pass rate in the regular ed program, as well as my students in the alternative program. But that was 4 nights a week that I had to spend working a part-time job just to afford life-saving medical equipment. No other family should have to ration insulin in order to put food on the table. And too many times, people are a medical crisis away. And even those who have employer-based insurance, Rob, what good is employer-based insurance when you lose your job? And so looking at this pandemic, we have to transition. I loved Obamacare. I love the Affordable Care Act, and it insured millions of Americans. But we have not addressed the issue of the millions of Americans who are still without health care. And so we have to have Medicare for all, because it's the only system that prioritizes people over profits. And we need to stop this profits of all these hospital CEOs and these insurance companies, because this is a misery economy that they're benefiting from. And so I am firmly committed to Medicare for all, because I've had to navigate that system. And it's those lived experiences that lets me know that hundreds of people across this nation, across the state, hundreds of thousands are facing these same issues. And for once and for all, we need to make sure that everyone has access to health care. It is a basic human right. broadband expansion. How are you going to get telemedicine when you don't have broadband? I've worked with students all year in this pandemic who cannot even access remote learning and online learning because the broadband is not strong enough. So these are the issues that can have the propensity to create real structural change, to change the socioeconomic status of hundreds of millions of Americans. And this is what we need to do to support that bold platform. And we have the power to do it. We can do it, but I am the change that we need to see.
I agree 100%. What would you tell the young people that are listening and the young at heart that are listening of how, give them some hope, I guess. I should just say that. Give them some hope.
And this is what I shared to give you hope. It doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to have the climate crisis that we have. We don't have to have people, not even with a survivor's wage, barely able to get by with on $7.25 an hour. But we have to be that change. We can change that. It's a choice. It's a choice to allow Amazon and Duke Energy to pay zero in corporate taxes. That's a choice. It's a choice to not be bold enough and support people that we know who are going to fight for us. And so I'm asking you to make that choice. As President Obama said, be that change that you want to see. And so it's more of us than them. And we have been disappointed by what has happened in the past. And we understand what Bernie fought for and what Elizabeth Warren fought for and what so many of us are still fighting for today. But this is our time. Our time is now. And so I want to encourage you, the young people, the young at heart, they will be the largest voting bloc. They were the largest voting bloc in 2020. They will be the largest voting bloc in 2022. If we want real structural change, then we have to support real candidates who are going to do that. It means that you're going to have to dig deep. Because we have progressive platforms and because we are running a bold action against the status quo. The status quo is not going to support us. The establishment is not going to support us, but it's more of us than them. So I'm asking you to dig deep. Dig down deep within you, become involved. We need to register new voters. We need to register an electorate. We need to donate to progressive campaigns, and we need to get involved early. If you don't have money, you can volunteer. Provide volunteer service, be one of our digital interns, be able to follow us on social media, share our message, sign our petitions for UBI. So the hope that I give you is that this is our time. There is no other time than now to champion these bold progressive ideas that are big enough to address the challenges that we are facing. And when all of us come together, yes, we can. Donating $5, $10, $20 a month, recurring, continuing to build the network and advancing our agenda. So I hope that you understand that we can have an America that we can believe in again, America that works for us again, an America that can be trusted again, an America that we can all love again. And you can't even spell America without Erica. Please go to my website, www.ericaforus.com. I am truly one of us for all of us and one of us who will fight for us. Thank you.
That was so inspiring. God bless you for saying that. That was amazing. And you really inspired me through this time. Again, ericaforus.com. Definitely check her out. This is a woman that if you put the $5, $10, $15, $20 behind, I think it's well worth it. And Erica, I know you said as we end right now, people can help obviously by going to ericaforus.com, but also if they're in Florida or California or Massachusetts, wherever, they can still help out.
Yes, you can still help out. You can go to our website. You can volunteer to help us with phone banking, registering new voters. You can follow us on Instagram, Erica for Us, on Facebook, Erica for NC, and on Twitter, Erica for for US Senate. So please follow us on social media, help spread the word, email it to your networks, share our links, go to our petition, sign our petition, share our petition. And once you follow us and spread the information in your networks, we'll be happy to invite you down when we start going our canvassing door to door, but that's down the road. But this is the way that you can get involved today. And, you know, even though you're from Florida, Texas, California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, this is for all of us because we need another Democrat in the U.S. Senate, but we also need a bold, progressive agenda, and we need that U.S. Senator. We currently don't have any Black women in the U.S. Senate. We've only had 2 in 242 years of these elections. And so we need the voice of a Black woman in the U.S. Senate. And I will carry all of you, carry all of us in there when I go.
Erica Smith, thanks so much for your time. EricaForUS.com. You've been amazing. And you'll definitely have my help because I was so inspired by that. Thank you so much.